I started at IDC. I came on board as the executive director.
Yeah.
Um, pardon me. IDC is an organization that, for a long time, uh, grabbed my interest. I was a volunteer for many years before that. Excuse me. IDC was founded in 2014 during the ISIS genocide.
Yeah.
In 2014, ISIS was all over the news. It was all over the headlines in the United States, in Europe, all over the world. But unfortunately, although the media was covering it, the government was silent, particularly the United States government, but most Western governments were silent, although it
Yeah.
was all over the media. IDC was put together initially as a response to this silence. It was in 2014 when a group of friends, Americans, I should say, who
Yeah.
came together, who were concerned for their fellow Christians in the Middle East. And it started off not as an organization, it started as a movement.
Yeah.
In 2014, they put together the first conference, which was a big summit in Washington, D.C. They invited members of Congress, members of the administration. At the time, it was the Obama administration, State Department, media, foreign leaders, foreign ministers, government ministers, to come together to discuss the issue and say action is needed. The initial response to the IDC summit was not just positive, but it was very effective. And it was in 2014, after that initial summit, where the United States government started to take it seriously, and they officially designated the ISIS genocide as an official genocide. And it was after that genocide recognition that aid and not only military action against ISIS was able to happen, but also
Yeah.
humanitarian aid was able to be provided to the victims and survivors of the ISIS genocide. It was after that initial summit in 2014 when it was organized and established as an organization, not just as a movement. So again, I'm blessed to be part of the organization, and I'm humbled to be part of the organization to be able to do this work for Christians internationally.
Actually, I heard about the IDC through, let's say, your person, because you are publishing a lot on social media, etc. I didn't know IDC before, or to be honest, but it's very interesting organization, and we as Kano, or me personally, I'm very thankful that there's something like the IDC, and I hope God will bless your work, and you will continue supporting not only our people, the Syriac, but all minorities in the Middle East, or even I think in North Africa, where you have your focus also. Could you explain what is the goal of IDC? It's not humanitarian work. I think it's more uh, let's say lobby work for the interests of the minorities in the Middle East. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, you're very close to what we do. So after the initial ISIS thing that I just discussed, in the first Trump administration, ISIS was basically defeated. It didn't go away. ISIS is still there today, but what we call the territorial defeat of ISIS. So they didn't hold land, they didn't hold territory at all. This is like 2017, 2018, thereabout.
Yeah.
After the territorial defeat of ISIS, IDC still had lots of work to do, although ISIS was not an immediate threat. IDC opened its focus to look at Christians in Egypt, the Copts, to look at Christians throughout, of course, Iraq and Syria, also Turkey, the Holy Land, Iran, and even Nigeria, which is not part of the
Yeah.
Middle East, but Nigeria is a huge, huge hotspot of Christian persecution. So this is what we do: we operate along three prongs basically. So one is media engagement, right? So putting the word out there in the media, educating the public, and that sort of thing. The next is actual education and proliferation of information, let's say, for a Western audience, as well as for lawmakers, members of the U.S. government. The third one, of course, as you mentioned, is lobbying. So policy,
Yeah.
lobbying, advocacy, and that sort of thing. So we operate along those three avenues, three prongs to do our work, and that's what we're doing today. Thank God.
Great. Can you give us some, let's say, highlights of your work at IDC? Something which every Syrio, every Syriac people should know about.
Sure. Yeah. So we know genocide recognition, the ISIS genocide, was a big success of IDC early on. The genocide, what we call in the United States, the Armenian genocide, which was really the Armenian, Greek, Syriac, Assyrian, Chaldean, the greater the Aramean uh, genocide, went unrecognized by the U.S. government for over 100 years. Uh, it was recently, just over the last few years, where IDC, along with a big coalition of partner organizations in the United States, were able to change this. In 2019, the United States Congress, both the House of Representatives as well as the Senate, officially recognized the genocide of Christians under the Ottoman Empire, the Armenians, Syriacs, Greeks, Assyrians, and so forth. This was in 2019. But even so, even though the U.S. Congress recognized it, the White House did not recognize it, which was a problem because until the White House recognized it, the U.S. government still did not officially recognize it. Although one branch of the U.S. government did, but it
Mm.
wasn't until 2021. In fact, on April 24th, which is Armenian Genocide
Yeah.
Remembrance Day, where President Joe Biden, former President Biden, recognized the genocide of Christians in the Ottoman Empire, which officially granted recognition to the genocide which our grandparents and great grandparents were victims and survivors of. The official name is the Armenian Genocide, as far as the U.S. government is concerned. But in the legislation that IDC worked on, in the legislation, we made sure we made a point, a priority to
Yeah.
include names of all Christian groups that were affected by this, which includes Syriacs, Assyrians, Arameans, and Chaldeans. So this is a great success of ours. Just last year in 2023, excuse me, in 2024, pardon me,
No problem.
IDC worked with the U.S. Congress to pass legislation to hold accountable proxy terrorist organizations of Iran throughout the Middle East. So, Iranian proxy organizations in Iraq that are holding the Nunwa plane hostage to this day, those in Syria, those in Lebanon, Hezbollah specifically, and those operating in the West even.
Okay. Do you also work with the pardon me, the organizations of the Christians, the Syriac, Syrian, etc. organizations in the homeland? Do you have active coalition with them, active work with them? How does
We
it work?
do.
Yeah,
We do, yes, we do. In fact, we host many uh, partner organizations in the United States. When folks come from the Middle East, whether it's from Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, to the United States for a number of reasons, whether it's just a visit or whether it's for a
yeah,
conference or a summit, we make sure to bring them with us in our advocacy, in our lobbying, uh, in Washington, in Congress, and in the White House and State Department. Just recently, we joined with the Patriarch Ephraim II in Washington D.C., where he spoke at a worldwide summit, the International Religious Freedom Summit,
mhm,
and he actually had the chance to meet with many high officials at the U.S. State Department and in Congress to share his message. But he's not the only one. We've hosted many political figures from Iraq, from our people, from the
mhm,
KRG region, from the Iraq central government, who are members of parliament.
yeah,
Of course, they belong to parties, Syriac parties, whether it's
yeah,
from the north or from KRG regions. They belong to Syriac, Assyrian, Chaldean parties. We hosted them here to share their message as well. So one thing IDC has always tried to do, I should say, is we try to stay above politics. We try to focus on a lot like what Kano does. We try to stay above politics, above the name issue, because it's these issues that I feel divide us and have
yeah,
always divided us, for many decades. And now in the diaspora, my perspective is, if you call yourself Syriac, Assyrian, Chaldean, Aramean, Christian, Middle Eastern Christian, Oriental Christian, I'm here for you. I'm here to advocate with you and to help you share your message.